بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. يا ربنا زدنا علما وتقوى وبارك في أوقاتنا وفي أقوالنا واهدنا وثبت أقدامنا وسهل علينا الخير تحقيقه وتطبيقه ولا تأخذنا بالأخطاء منا ولا يزلل. نصلي ونسلم على الذي أرسلته رحمة للعالمين. أما بعد, we want to explore where we're at this moment in time with some of the arguments that are being thrown around in the community with regard to social issues and with regard to people's conditions and so on and so forth. Tariq, actually, I have to talk to you. I was thinking about you today. I have to talk to you. Shaikh, he needs some information. But in any event, going back to the point, some of you, because you're dealing with issues in your head and you're not dealing with the social reality, in other words, you're addressing social problems solely as arguments that are being tossed around in the community. Now you fall into a contradiction in principles. The main thesis that's being put out by the Muslim Akh team that operates as a network of influence in the Muslim community and pushes the thesis that liberalism is operating a hidden agenda, and that thesis, right, of the liberal agenda being pushed in the Muslim community is being controlled by the LGBT community. That's part of the thesis. It begins to fall apart at this point in time from this angle. Not that people don't sway influence. We agree that there's people that have influence, they push their positions, but I will say it's because people are organized. They're organized, they have strategy, they work together, or they work in solidarity even if they differ from each other, right? And so part of the issue is this. I haven't connected with them. I've been keeping up with some of their work, but I think that, from what I'm understanding, I think it's solid work. And, I think that overall, and I mentioned this before, the work that Iman is doing is something that, Islamic Learning Foundation, 3 Puerto Rican Imams, is something that we really appreciate, because they're doing a certain type of work that, we have alignment with that, and so I personally think that they're doing an excellent job. We need more of that type of work, not only in the inner city, but also we need to open up in the suburbs in that way as a community organization that's benefiting. And we need to expand out to dealing with the elders, the elderly people that are sheltered in homebound. We need to have centers like that create environments that are beneficial to them. And also, we need to support these types of efforts. Like, what Iman is doing is not enough. It needs more support from different organizations to support that effort and complement it. Also, you can't have one organization doing everything. But the reason why I say that is because the whole issue of re-entry, is a long process. And so it's not just the issue of bailing out, or not just the issue of re-entry. I wish that people also look to Hassan Abdul Latif is his name, in Colorado. Second Chance reentry program, see the type of stuff that they're doing. But I wanted to go back to this point. The conservative camp has reached some contradictions which are extremely problematic. And sometimes you begin to wonder, if it's psychologically tenable. They say that there's a liberal agenda and they tie it into the LGBT community. And I made it open. I say that the LGBT community is a highly organized community. It has an effective network. And I say they're open in what they're doing. They have to be open from the angle that because what they want to do is they want to achieve a presence. So they have come out of the closet. So to say it's a hidden agenda is a problematic thesis. It's not a hidden agenda. They're very open with what they're doing. They want to create a space for themselves in the public setting. And they have created it for the last, almost 40, 50 years, since the 60s. You understand what I'm saying? So they reach federal protected status. They have the ability now to openly talk about their history. And there's places that you go and there's historical plaques that say that, talk about them. So I don't buy that issue that is a hidden agenda. They're very open. Liberalism has been here in the making for a long time. It is another boogeyman thesis. We have other issues which are much more problematic. And that is, for instance, neoliberalism, in that the marketplace becomes dominant over everything. And so capitalism has commodified everything. Everything is commodified. Nature is commodified. Water is commodified. Everything is given a value in economic terms. Everything is commodified. Even the human body is commodified. And so, there's other challenges aside from just talking about liberalism, like where transhuman philosophy is taking us. Like when you look at Elon Musk and all of those people, right? Ray Kurzweil, when you look at the whole concept of singularity, where they're talking about technology and how technology is going to reach a point where it's going to be like God. Look at the singularity thesis, and that's promoted by Ray Kurzweil. Look at the transhuman concepts, where human beings are, the idea is to tie in human beings to technology and so on and so forth, right? And so, right, the Black Lives Matters, it clearly openly says where they're at. But that's not the only thing. They're telling you what their identity is. That's the problem that I have with the Muslim community. It's like, where have you been? You know what I'm saying? Where have you been in society? This is nothing new. It's like you wake up one day and you decide that this is the problem, and you abstain from, dealing with your own responsibility. Yeah, we're dealing with other issues that are major, like AI taking over jobs. Like right now, AI is not in its complete form, but AI is going to be something which is going to eliminate many jobs. It's already started. When you start talking about, part of AI is not so futuristic. Part of AI is going to be using the technology that we have to create processes that will eliminate jobs. Something as simple as, eliminating toll booths and just having automated tellers, or something such as having Walmart stores which have a minimal amount of tellers or no tellers at all, or no clerks, or whatever you want to say from that regard, or making education online and having one teacher, have 100 classrooms that they control. So let's not get so futuristic that we're out in the point where, we're not dealing with the reality that's before us. Now, that other stuff may come in stages, but it's very clear that artificial intelligence still has work. But look at where they're trying to take us. Look at how, Elon Musk has been trying to have a driverless car. So a lot of this stuff is putting us to a point where the human being is marginalized. Look at the sex robot, where basically you're talking about the idea of a person having a partner, which is not a human being. You understand what I'm saying? So there are other issues that we have to be talking about instead of fixating on one issue. And we already talked about how we as a Muslim community handle those issues. Part of handling the issue of how you're going to deal with a federally protected group that you may have differences with on some fronts, and some fronts you may agree, or you may say, no, I don't agree on justice issues with them. Whatever it may be, I don't even care at this point with that type of discussion, because it's a moot point. Those who are going to be involved in the justice struggle, they're there. But there's another group of Muslims that all they're doing is just talking. And so they're creating confusion, and they're falling into confusion themselves. And they're not moving in the action-oriented side. You know, we haven't, like we said, like, where's the investment in Islamic education? They're so scared about Muslim children, but Muslim schools, Islamic schools, don't even have budgets to maintain them. So if they really were so scared about that, you would see that they would do at least like the Catholics and the Jews or others, that they felt as though they were going to lose their identity, or they felt threatened. They built the whole educational system. So that becomes a moot point. You understand what I'm saying? It's not even an argument anymore, because it's not serious. We can't take it serious. This is ideological battling that has no basis in doing something actual for the Muslim community. But part of the issue that we have, if we're going to say that there's this agenda that's operating, and they're responsible for changing people, they're responsible for changing their values and their thinking, then that, you know, and deny systemic racism at the same time, well, then if we're going to deny systemic racism, then we're going to deny that there is a hidden agenda that's changing people, and we're just going to say everybody's responsible for themselves. So you're responsible if somebody impacts you only. You know what I'm saying? You're responsible if somebody changes you. You're the one that's responsible. Let's use the same position. If we're going to go with that school of thought, let's just say everyone is responsible for themselves. That's it. Leave it at that point. Since that's the argument, that is only individual morality that we're going to go by, and everything is just focused on individual change. Forget about society. Just focus on the individual and just focus on your heart. Then the same thing when it comes to sexuality and this and that. No one can force you. You know, no system is doing anything to you. That's an illusion, right? The same thing that they say that is an illusion of the left, we say is an illusion of the right. You know, that the LGBT community is forcing you to change your sexuality. The LGBT community is influencing you. That's all a fabrication. Because at the end of the day, you're responsible for your own behavior. You know what? I 100%, and I'm not being rhetorical, I agree that we have a level of responsibility, right? That the human being has the capacity to make decisions, and the human being has to be responsible, and the human being has to work on himself and herself. On that, we have no debate. The argument that we have is that we say, where we're different than the other camp, is we say the human being also is weak. The human being is also susceptible to waswasa. That the human being can also be influenced by environment. We have sociological data to prove that. We have social psychological data to prove that. We have anthropological data to prove that. Right? And we have information in the Quran and the Sunnah that tell us that. We have a hadith or statements from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam talking to us about al-jalis al-salih wa al-jalis al-sul, that you can be influenced by your companions. We have the hadith of the man that killed 99 men, which shows that part of the advice on self-transformation is going into another environment. We also have the concept of enjoining the good and forbidding the evil as a jama'ah, right? We also have the concept that's in the Quran that if there's no enjoining the good and forbidding the evil, that even the righteous will be taken. In other words, there's societal influence. So where some of our brothers, they need to calm down a little bit, because we understand that they have the intention to protect the deen, unless they are part of the payroll to create fitna, or unless they're part of the ignorant camp, which is just jumping into argument for argument's sake. Everything is possible there. But let's assume with a good opinion that people have a good intention, that they just want to protect the deen. then they need to slow down and take the advice. You're destroying, you're undermining what you want to achieve. What you want to achieve is people to take personal responsibility and focus on purifying themselves. Then you're undermining that, because you're saying that systemic racism doesn't exist. That there's no such thing as racism. There's no such thing as white supremacy. There's no wealth gap problem. There's a lot of things that are being said. But then at the same time, you say that there is a group that has an agenda that's moving everything. You know, you're beginning to sound irrational at that point. And so the good that you're trying to push to the community, you're pushing the community also to the other side. That becomes part of the problem. And we're in ummah, not that you decide, but that the Quranic concept and descriptive of the ummah decides. We're an ummah of balance. Right? We're ummah of the wasat. Right? And so we have to know how to achieve that wasat. How we achieve that median position or that balanced position is that we have to weigh everything on the scales of Islamic decision making. Notice what I'm saying, Islamic decision making. Why? Because in certain circumstances, Islam allows us to weigh between different degrees of harm. In other words, how you weigh through lesser of evils. That's not something that's a compromised point. Imam Ibn Taymiyyah, rahmatullahi alayh, there was an occasion historically where he was walking by a person from the Tatar that was known to have been engaging in oppression of the Muslims. In other words, they were violently oppressing the Muslims. And he was walking by with one of his students. And so the student saw the guy drinking alcohol. And so the student was adamant about enjoining the good and forbidding the evil. And wanted to stop him because he's corrupting the environment. So Ibn Taymiyyah told them to relax and be patient. Let him be while he's openly committing that act of breaking down public morality, so to speak. He said, because if he's not engaging in that action, preoccupying himself with that, he would be sober and he would be participating in the destruction of the Muslim community. That's one example in scholarship. Another example is the example of how it is that the Quran itself eliminated alcohol. It gradually eliminated alcohol. It openly didn't attack people because they were drinking alcohol. Matter of fact, our mother Aisha, and I've been mentioning this over and over again, so people become more sophisticated in their thinking. You know, and it's not because I'm saying become sophisticated in their thinking, for you to become sophisticated in your thinking, because the deen is calling us to be sophisticated in our thinking. When Aisha is asked about the Quran, and I keep mentioning this example over and over again, she talks about what were the first ayat to be revealed. And she mentions if the first ayat to be revealed were to tell people to stop drinking and to stop fornicating, that the people themselves would tell the leadership in the community, in other words, they would say, no, we're not going to stop drinking and fornicating. So we have to come back to Quranic methodology. You know, and so that type of approach that the Muslims are taking, that's irresponsibility on the part of the leadership. And I'm going to tell you why. And I'm going to be very honest with you. Because some of the people that are pushing that, if we were to take them to task, if we were to pull them by the collar, and if we were really to pull them by the collar, because I just sat with an imam recently as well, who's not from the indigenous community, and the same thing came up. If we were to pull these people by the collar and sit them down, they have homosexuals in their families. They have people from the LGBT community in their families. Some of these people. You understand what I'm saying? So some of us, we're openly saying over and over again, we know what the ruling is in Islam to that stuff. It's clear. We don't need you to keep repeating it because you're not adding any value. But we need to ask you, what are you doing to build the community, to fortify it? And how are you addressing people that are struggling right? And how are you going to carry the da'wah to people that have that type of orientation? Unless you give me a proof to tell me that Islam says that it is prohibited to give da'wah to people that oppose issues in the deen. If you give me a proof to that, and this is my challenge right now, and it's not a rhetorical challenge, it's an actual challenge. I'm being open. If you give me a proof that Islam says that it's forbidden for the LGBT community to become Muslim, that it's forbidden for us to call them to Islam, just answer me those two issues. Starting off with, give me some evidence that tells us, that's evidence that's absolute, qat'i, without a doubt, with certainty, that Islam says is prohibited for people from the LGBT community to come into Islam. We already know what Islam says about sexual practices, so we don't need a conversation on that. There's no deviating from what's clear in the deen and that stuff. We're clear on that. We're not of those people that come in and bring in ta'wilat or interpretations that are exaggerated to justify sexual activity, right? That is not the sexual activity that's normative in Islam between the male and the female. You want me to be more explicit? I'll be more explicit. And I'm saying it like that to be raw about it, because people, they don't want to come to the table. We don't advocate, right? We don't advocate, and I'm saying it 3 times, in the tradition of the Sunnah, right? We don't advocate in Islam the practice of same-sex intercourse. We don't advocate in Islam the practice of bisexuality, right? We don't advocate in Islam other types of sexual practices other than that which is normative in Islam and has been normative since the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam were communicated in Mecca. That's something that's clear in the deen. There's no confusion in that. Do people sin? Do people make mistakes? Do they have issues? Yeah, they do. They do. We had a Muslim who's married, went to an LGBT club, which happened to be a lot of Puerto Ricans in Florida, engaged in LGBT sexual behavior, and then flipped and went and killed the people, right? That were in that club. He went and shot it up. And from the reports, go back and look at the reports. From the reports that came in, his wife ended up supporting him. Total embarrassment to the Muslim community. Because now you have a Muslim that committed an act of aggression, killed people, took their lives, wasn't involved in LGBT sexual activity, and at the same time involved his Muslim wife in that whole process. Muslims, get it together. Get it together. What type of orientation do you have? Don't let people take you outside of your humanity in the name of bigotry. Be clear on Islamic teachings. But we're not allowed to violate the dignity of other human beings, even though we may disagree with them. I personally will not stand for the violation of the dignity of any human being, regardless of who they are. You can't violate people's dignity as human beings. This is an absolute reality in the deen. Fornication, adultery, all of that. Islam goes to the point of saying that if you're going to accuse someone of fornication or adultery, you have to have witnesses. 4 witnesses, which is almost an impossibility to achieve. The ulama, they even question in Islamic scholarship whether photography or video can be used as evidence because it can be altered. That's the mercy of Islam. Whereas in this society, with one witness, there's cases in Texas during the Bush administration, I'm sure during outside of that as well, that people have been given the death penalty for one witness. Muslims, we're claiming Islam, but then we're operating on some other terms in terms of our values. So for instance, we're falling into a contradiction. We're going into an excess. The da'wah, or the call for personal responsibility and purification of the heart, that is 100% beneficial effort. But the deen just doesn't stop at that. There's benefit to calling the people to purify their hearts. There's benefit to calling the people to have good character. As a matter of fact, it's an obligation in the deen. So there's no dispute and no argument. All of us are in agreement on that issue. But if you're going to come in the name of pushing that, and because you have a beef with the LGBT community or liberals or whatever it is within your ideology, and you say that those groups have the ability to transform people's behavior, but then at the same time you're denying systemic racism and you're denying oppression in the land, you're saying no. People are responsible for their own economic situations. That there's really no systemic racism, there's no white supremacy. That type of logic. What are we now? What are we doing? Now, the issue becomes, where are we going at this point in time? Now we're undermining the whole issue because now we sound like a bunch of conspiracy theorists. And we mentioned that before, and we mention it again. People are open. You understand what I'm saying? People are open. People are clear on what they want to achieve in the dunya. They have objectives. You know the hadith of intention, the actions are by intention. You can also say action should have goals and purposes. And if action should have goals and purposes, that means Islam is teaching you strategic action. As a matter of fact, فَذَلِكُمْ الرِّبَاطِ, for you to be in the fortress awaiting like a warrior, is a description of the person that's waiting in salah, from salah to salah. In other words, that you should be calculative in how your time is moving. You should understand where the cardinal points are so that you know where you stand on the earth, so you know where the qibla is at. You should have an understanding of the movement of the sun and the moon and the stars, so you how to deal with time. Right? دع ما يريبك إلى ما لا يريبك. That hadith is saying mind your priorities. It's not just the issue of saying, well, mind your business. So it's saying mind your business, meaning what is it that you're supposed to be doing right now? In fiqh, we have something that's called wajib al-waqt, the obligation of the time. And so that becomes the issue. Where's your strategy? What are your objectives? Where do you stand on the earth? How do you use your money? You know what I'm saying? What's your 50-year plan? How are you organized to achieve your goals? Do you have any goals other than just making money and eating at nice restaurants, living in the suburbs? You understand what I'm saying? Having nice clothing, having a second house. Do you have any goals in the dunya beyond yourself and your family? Because other people have goals in the dunya beyond themselves and their families. Don't be envious, even of the non-Muslim. Don't be envious, because envy in the deen is forbidden at that point. Were you mad because you don't have what they have? Again, we use the same argument. Your situation that you're in with your children, your situation that you're in your community is your fault. If we're going to use the conservative fault line, then everyone is their fault. The Yemenis being destroyed is their fault. The Syrians being destroyed is their fault. Palestine, the way it is their fault. The Muslims being refugees in the world is their fault. If that's the line of reasoning that we're being asked to accept. Poor people, they're poor and homeless, it's their fault. Person falls into depression, clinical depression, it's their fault. You know, if we keep going on and on with that, yes, there's a degree in which all of us have to be responsible. But there's many other evidences that say that is, you know, is a dynamic situation. Like, why are we called to community then? If everything just revolves around the individual only, then why should I go make salah with people in the masjid? Right? Why should I give zakat? Why should I be concerned for other people? Why should I give people a sadaqah with a smile? Right? Why should I facilitate the burdens of another being? Why should I respect the rights of the neighbor? If everything is just going to be about me, myself, my salvation, that's the that is the essence of liberalism. To just be focused on yourself as an individual. And see, when we become polemical, this is the type of stuff that happens. We begin to fall into contradictions and we begin to lose the original purpose. And this is why debate, for the sake of debate and for the sake of pushing your ideas and agenda only, it becomes forbidden in Islam. Because then you're not open to being corrected. You're not open to the idea that you may be wrong. You're not open to any other good. We can't continue like that. Deen and correcting our situation, people, is not an argument. Correcting our situation is to implement to engage in the practice of shura. Shawarahum fil amr is a command of the deen. Consult them in the affair. The believers are described as governing themselves predicated upon consultation. So our conversation should be full of consultation about how we can get to the station of elevation. How can we elevate ourselves? And I said it like that with the jingle so that we remember it. Consultation should be for elevation, right? That's the reality at the end of the day. Consultation should lead to implementation, to execution. We fail at execution. We talk a good game as a community. How many people, you can go anywhere on what was normal times, and you're going to hear everyone is talking about the situation of the youth. Everyone will be talking about the situation of the youth because it became popular in the Muslim community. But then when it comes to execute an actual plan to address the situation of the youth, the execution is lacking. The execution is lacking. For one reason or another, there's no one that's paid to put the plan together. The people fall out. What 1,000 reasons of why there's no execution. So, consultation has to be for our elevation, and that elevation can't come unless there's implementation of that agreement that's in that consultation. That's just a reality at the end of the day. If we're going to not come to decisions together, and we're just going to bicker back and forth, and we're not going to implement anything together, then we're not going to go anywhere. Because at the end of the day, we're going to leave as enemies. If you feel as though someone is threatening your existence, then what are you doing to deal with that situation and address it? And we mentioned that people in the world, when they feel that they have a problem, they sit down, they understand it, they dissect it, and stage by stage, they address it. But the same people that are saying that the liberals this, the liberals that, and they say the liberals play the victim role, are playing the victim role. Oh, we're being attacked by the liberals. Oh, the LGBT community is trying to destroy us. There's a victimization mentality at this point. And we mentioned, if you want to address those issues, come up with a plan. My concern here is that we now have adopted this idea of liberalism as being the monster evil of everything. And we're not looking at any other issues. It's easy for people to say that liberalism is that We're not talking about materialism. Materialism, and how materialism in the Muslim community, we were warned about it. I don't fear poverty for you, I fear riches for you. We were warned about materialism. How materialism in the Muslim community. Look, in some people, in some masajid, if you come into the parking lot with a vehicle that's under $15,000, then you really are not part of that community. Trust me, I know. I'm telling you stories of brothers that have expressed that. You know what I'm saying? I'm coming to the parking lot with my beat up Toyota Corolla. Everybody's rolling around in a Mercedes Benz, a BMW, you know, a Tesla. You know what I'm saying? On and on. And I'm not part of that community. Materialism. We don't talk about materialism. If we يعني لو نحن سنخاطب الناس ونعلم الناس الخطأ في الاعتقاد والخطر من المذاهب المعاصرة يعني فعلينا أن نعلم الناس عن المذاهب. If we're going to sit here and we're going to talk to the people and talk to them about the dangers, you know, of different schools of thought, or, you know, where mistakes are and all that type of stuff, then teach the people the range of schools of thought that are out there. Relativism is another issue. That there's no truth. Is, you know, we have a statement that's in American culture that our youth say, you know, you're the truth. You're the truth. Or my truth. I'm living out my truth. Or that's your perspective. Those are keywords that are part of a philosophy. That there's no absolute truth, which means a denial of revelation. That means there's no guiding truth. It's your perspective, my perspective. We don't talk about the problem of that, the problem of relativism. We're not talking about, you know, the problem of excessive doubt, which is agnosticism. I'm not sure, you know, if Allah exists in the sense of applied to Aqidah and belief. Or, you know, I don't even know what's true. Doubt to the point, you know, we have a whole school of doubt. Madhab Shaikh. Or over criticism, which a lot of Muslims are overly critical. Like the Catholic philosopher said, Paul Ricoeur, they help us as destroyers, but they don't help us as builders. Criticizing, everything is criticized. Everything is criticized with no solutions, no call to anything else. We don't talk about narcissism, you know, as a madhab, as a school of thought. It's about me. It's about me, and I'm the one. Everyone has to come and worship me. So we're going to talk about problems of the heart. You know what I'm saying? If we're going to talk about problems of morality, then extend it out. Talk about cultural realities. How there's cultural practices which are problematic. Like the way that we look at women. Or the way that we look, you know, at different skin colors. How many people in the Muslim community are spending, you know, the Muslim community spends millions of dollars. And the data is there. I'm not talking from my desire, on skin bleachers. Trying to be white. Allah made them with beautiful skin. Whether it's a light color or a medium color or a dark color. And they want to change the skin. As to say Allah made a mistake. Changing the creation of Allah. But, you know, our only priority is on one thing. You know, our only fixation is with one thing. And that's where it becomes an extreme. And that becomes an issue in the excess. That's what begins to lead to bid'ah. Sometimes it's the bid'ah of abandoning certain practices in the deen. Like being balanced. Like verifying things. Like regarding people's dignity. Like calling people to Islam. Like believing in the possibility of human beings changing. Like looking in the good of people. Like being merciful. There's 1,000 qualities that are not there. We have to stop that. You know, we have to stop that type of imbalanced approach. So, you know, there's a social factor to behavior and there's an individual factor to behavior. You know, and we have to understand that as a reality. But let me tell you something. Those who don't have anything to stand for will fall for anything. And that's a very true statement that comes from the wisdom of culture, popular culture. If the Muslims don't know where they stand, then you're going to be everything that, you see, you're going to be, oh, this is the enemy. This is a threat. It's like you're scared to come out into the world. You're scared that other people are confident in what they believe in and how they function. Where's your confidence in what you believe in and how you function? I don't think there's much more to say other than that. You know what I'm saying? These lives are for only one purpose, not to promote myself. These lives are so that we sit down and we begin to talk as a community about how it is that we can move forward and create solutions. Not only to identify issues and problems, but how can we dialogue? Can we at least learn how to dialogue with each other? That's part of the issue. Can we at least sit down and learn how to dialogue with each other? And we don't. Part also of dialoguing is knowing that we have a limit. Muslims talk about liberalism and the evils of it. And I'm going to tell you, there's an aspect of liberalism which is extremely problematic. Everybody having an opinion for the sake of having an opinion. And that includes the whole of the community. Everybody has an opinion just because they have an opinion. And we're talking about liberalism only in sexuality. You know what I'm saying? What about everybody doing their own thing? Individualism. And not believing in the group. Not believing in leadership. Not believing in organization. Not believing in strategy. Why didn't you imitate that from the conservative camp? How they organize themselves. Why aren't you imitating from the GOP that you say is the solution? Organization. Control of education. You understand what I'm saying? Having a worked out position. Why don't you if you're going to imitate that camp, why don't you imitate the positives? Why do you imitate the stuff that's destructive? Like, for instance, not having a beef with racism. Like, for instance, condemning the poor. We can go on and on. Like, we have to be fair because we're neither liberal nor conservative. This type of stuff is an innovation in the deen. The deen gives us judgment over these schools of thought. These schools of thought are not our deen. So if a person decides to vote Democrat, that's on them. They have to make the decisions from Islam of how they're coming to that. But because they're Democratic, doesn't mean that, they're outside of the deen. Or because they're Republican, doesn't mean that they're outside of the deen. But now if they start holding certain positions which contradict the deen, then we can have a conversation. We're not going to throw them out of the deen. Why are you going that route? Why are you doing that? Not automatically jumping to the gun and pronouncing takfir on people, taking them outside of Islam. Now we're violating the principles of the deen. Because people have the benefit of brotherhood. And their blood is infallible. Fihi isma. You can't just take people outside of Islam or call people things like you're munafiq, you're a hypocrite and this and that like that. That type of approach, Islam forbids that. You have to have evidence for how you come into these conclusions. One brother tried to accuse me specifically of promoting LGBT, and I told him, I said straight up, where is the proof of that? Well, we talk about the support of the LGBT agenda. Right now we're seeing that also, for a long time, within the Constitution, there was a support for the freedom of speech of hate mongers. We see that, people that believe in the Nazi party and racism, they're allowed to go out into the public and declare what their positions are. So, you live in a secular society and it's full of everything. It's not just full of one thing. It's full of everything. That's the nature of the way that the West is. It's full of everything. It's not just full of one thing. At the same time, that same thing that you say the government all over the West supports LGBT, the government all over the West, for the most part, is struggling with supporting religious identity, supporting you and your existence, and the building of your masjid, and the building of your manifestation of your identity in the public. And sometimes because some people, they organize, they get to influence the system more than others. Or sometimes because people within the system have an agenda, they push their thing more than others. Let's stop. Let's be logical here. Let's use sciences here. Let's understand political science here. Let's understand sociology here. Let's understand the dynamics of power here. Let's understand the dynamics of money here. Let's understand the idea of political parties. Let's understand the function of media, the movement of media. Let's stop. Let's move out of this conspiratorial thinking, which is not able to pinpoint things on anything. Conspiracy has its role. There are influences, but let's also deal with what we can understand. Read some Umberto Eco. Let's deal with what we can understand. Let's understand the concept of serendipity. How things can all come together. They can look like they're together, but they're not. You can have two people walking down the block together side by side, and you can think that they're friends and they're together. And the person can have a headphone, an earpiece in, and he's talking. And the other person can have an earpiece in, and that person is talking, and you look from a distance and you think they're having a conversation, and it's two strangers walking side by side. Each one is having their own conversation, and from your perception, you thought that they were together and they're not. Or you can see a group and you can see somebody walking with that group and you think that person is part of the group, but they're not. Or you can profile somebody because you have prejudices and you can think that they're a certain way, but they're not. Come on, like there's science to functioning in the dunya. Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala made us rational beings. Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala gave us intellect to understand the function and the processes of nature. Not only the processes of nature, to understand the function of society and human behavior. Imam Ibn Khaldun was the father of sociology, the one that studied the rise and fall of civilizations, predicated upon Quranic concepts, and gave birth to the study of political science, anthropology, and all of that. And now we come back and we deny all of those things, and we somewhere caught up in a cesspool of irrationality. So we have to be balanced. Again, if you don't have your own position, don't be mad because other people are playing the game. I'm saying the same thing the conservative camp is saying. Take responsibility for your life. Take responsibility for your life, O Muslims. If you don't have a game plan, you don't have a strategy, you don't have an agenda, that means you don't have any direction. So you can scream Islam all night and all day. I'll give you one problem to fix. One problem to fix. And forget about the LGBT camp. Can you fix your own marital issues? Can you fix your own marital issues? Can you fix the pornography problem amongst Muslims? Deal with that sexuality problem. Can you mend the family relationship so that we can tone down the divorce rates? Can you solve the problem of single people trying to find somebody to marry but they can't find it? So that way they don't have to be in people's inboxes all day long trying to figure out that if there's a spouse. So that way Muslims are not talking to 20, 30, 40 people in a year's time and can't figure out who to marry. Or do I have to throw your dirt in your face? More than that. So if we're not able to solve our own issues, and we're creating boogeymen outside, or we're saying this is a threat, and you're making, when are we gonna take responsibility? I'm using the same principle that the conservative camp is saying: individual responsibility, focus on yourself. Except I'm saying as a community, when are we going to take responsibility? Because that's irresponsible for us just to be focusing outside on a constant basis, like they say about, like, they're talking about focus on your spirituality, focus on the heart. But what we're seeing is that actually the same people that are telling us focus on ourselves, on our heart, are also constantly having us look at other people, constantly having us look outside other people. Oh my God, this group is doing this to me. Oh my God. And they're saying that about the liberal camp, which some of the Democrats, they try to do that. They don't create environments of empowerment for people. We know the game. We know how they use the race card, but that doesn't mean racism doesn't exist. We know that. But the same thing with us right now. And so that's bad leadership on our part. That's something that I want to end on. If we're really concerned as a community with where we at, where is our SWOT analysis? Our strengths, our weaknesses, what are our opportunities, where are our threats? Where's our studies? When was the last time that we paid somebody $10,000 to study a local community and see bring an actual knowledge-based assessment of what are our strengths and our weaknesses? But we think we have it figured out. That's what it is. We think we can bypass knowledge. When's the last time, we complain about Ilhan Omar and Rashida and them, but when's the last time we came up with an actual plan of how to enter the political process? Okay, fine. X them out from the angle of, no, we don't want to go with them. So what do? We don't get involved in the political process. I'm serious. Literally, Allah knows. Allah is the witness. I'm actually asking a sincere question. It's not to be the contrarian. Is not to be back and forth. It's not to debate. But fine, X them out. You say that they support LGBT, this, that. X them out. So now the question is, don't enter the political process? I want to know. I want the guidance from the people who have all these complaints and criticisms of that effort that they made. Okay, X them out. What is your solution? How do we deal with this? Are you telling us don't engage the political process? Don't become part of Congress? Okay, if we're going to be part of the government, what is your guidance on political action? How do we do it? Tell me. Tell us, what is this study? Not just a Facebook Live or article here and there. Give me your actual study. Give me your actual study. Something like this on the political system of the Islamic State. No, on the political action of Muslims, not in some ideal made up state, but in the political process in American society. Not in some made up state. In American society, how do we engage the process? Because we're living with other people that are not Muslim. They're not going to accept us imposing our deen upon them. And neither should we impose our deen upon them, because we have a Quranic concept that there's no compulsion in the deen. La ikraha fi deen. But we can share our values with them. We can share our practices with them, because we live in a society that's pluralistic. But if we can't come up with solutions, you're mad this group, they went into the political process, you feel they support this, okay, how do you do it? Or okay, if we don't enter the political process, that's fine. If we don't enter the political process, then what do we do as a community? How do we safeguard our rights? And how do is a legit question. It doesn't have to be that we only do it this way or that way. There could be a third way. There's nothing set in stone that says it's only one way. There's no divine clear command from Allah wa ta'ala that says all Muslims is only one way. When it comes to Islamic politics and power dynamics, Islam gives us principles for how to function. There's different models of operation. We're not used to being in this type of situation, because the situation of the Muslims has mostly been for the Muslims to have power and be dominant. But in Habasha, in Africa, when the Muslims first went, they didn't have it. In Medina, when the Muslims first went, they didn't have it. The Constitution of Medina, or the Medinan Constitution, was an agreement between the Muslims and the people of the book on how to function. It wasn't just the Muslims. And so, what we should be demanding from our leadership, people, and I'm telling you this, I'm saying, I don't have any leadership role. Forget that I'm an imam. Forget that I'm a teacher. Forget I have this position, that. Forget it. I'm with you. For those of you who don't have those positions, what we should be demanding of our leadership is that we have solid discussions and studies on how to operate and move forward. Anything other than that is a betrayal of our trust, and it's a betrayal of the way that we function as a Muslim community with dignity and honor, and being a Muslim community that's upstanding, that's sloppy, is not befitting. And so at the end of the day, people, if we don't organize ourselves properly, you know what I'm saying, we're not going to go anywhere. And I keep saying that over and over again. Don't be mad at other communities because they're organized and you're not. It starts from the way the masjid operates. It starts from the way that we conversate to each other. You know, that's the reality at the end of the day. If you don't have a plan for how to structure your community and how to empower it, that's your fault. Right? It's your fault. If there's people influencing the political system, the educational system, so on and so forth, it's your fault. I'm using the same logic that the conservatives are using, and I'm telling them the same thing that they're saying about racism and this, that. I'm saying, fine, on this principle, I'm going to join you on that. Well, let's take personal responsibility, but we're going to apply that across the board. If you're going to tell people that poverty is their fault, if you're going to tell people that there's no such thing as systemic racism, this and that, then I'm going to say it's your fault that the LGBT community is influencing the Muslim community. Do something about it. And then I'm going to ask you, what is our plan? Since we're saying we're responsible for everything, since we're taking that corporate route, that Tony Robbins, that, you know, alpha type of CEO mentality, that we think that we're gods in the world, because that's how they think. That's where that leads up to. That type of level of exaggeration leads to a degree of kufr. In other words, you cannot be responsible for everything as an individual. It's impossible. You have limitations as an individual. That aqidah that says that, you know, everything is your fault is also trying to say that you're in control of everything. That's what it's saying. You're not in control of everything. It's impossible. You're not even in control of your own death. You're not in control even of your going to sleep or staying awake. There's limitations that you have. Accept your limitations. Accept your limitations as a human being. The question is, where is it that we can exercise power, and where is it that we can't exercise power? Where is it that we have an actual limitation? But human beings are not sovereign in totality. We don't believe in that type of, you know, thinking. That type of thinking is outside of the deen, but that's what they're teaching in corporate America, the get-rich schemes. They're teaching that, you know, the law of attraction, you think, you know, you can control the universe. If you ask the universe, everything will come to you. That type of kufr is being passed on. No, the human being is, you know, what we're commanded to in the Quran, تعاونوا على البر والتقوى ولا تعاونوا على الإثم والعدوان. ولولا دفع الله الناس بعضهم ببعض لفسدت الأرض. That Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala tells us, you know, cooperate, collaborate in goodness. And don't cooperate in sin and taking each other out. In other words, by cooperation, we achieve things. We're commanded to that. Allah tells us that if it's not for one group that repels another group, there'll be corruption in the earth. That's what they call sunnatul tadafu. You know, that there's a sunnah of repelling, that we compete with each other in that regard, in the dunya. And so that, you know, we have to demand that we as a community become more organized. We have to demand as a community that we have a vision, that we have a sense of direction. We don't have that. And I mentioned in the other live, and I'm going to shut this one down, you know, I mentioned in the other live the problem of leadership. And that's part of why we're in this situation. تَذْهَبْ رِيحُكُمْ, right, is what the Quran says, that your ability to implement and your ability to execute, your ability to achieve things, it goes from you when you differ to the point of internally collapsing yourself. That's the consequence. Then you have no execution power. And that's what I mentioned before, that, you know, shura, consultation, should be aimed at elevating our status, and that will come about with implementation on that which we agreed on in consultation. So that implementation can only take place, you know, by way of execution of what you agreed on. If there's no execution, You know, we can look and we can see, was there a planning stage? You know what I'm saying? Is there an agreement point to things? You know, implementation phase. You know, where's the execution? Did it go the way it was supposed to go? And remember, life is changing, so you always have to change your strategy. You know what I'm saying? In terms of your tactics. Your tactics have to constantly change because your strategy may be on par, but implementing it, you may have challenges because you live in a world that has moving pieces. You can have a natural disaster. You can have a pandemic. You know what I'm saying? You can have war. You can have death. You can have a lot of things that will stop your ability to implement plans from taking place. So we end on that note that we talked about leadership. And in this one, we talked about, we have to be cognizant. If we're going to do an analysis of what are the threats that are facing us, then we have to do a holistic analysis. We just can't be sectarian. The same stuff that we do with the groups, we're doing it with the non-Muslims. Oh, this group is against us. It's convenient to say only the liberals and the LGBT is against us and not address, the racism and so on and so forth. It's very convenient. That falls into a political narrative. And part of the camp that's doing it has aligned with the Trump administration politically. It's very convenient. It's not fair across the board. You understand what I'm saying? And we ask that, if you're going to critique at this point in time, because it's for benefiting the Muslim community, it's not for elevating a certain political party. Yani had a hizbiyah, ainul hizbiyah. If we're only going to support only one party only and think that only one party is right, political party, that's the type of stuff that we've been warned against doing. That type of political process. That's not the type of political activity that we engage in the deen. We should be clear on these issues. This political orientation has these strengths and these weaknesses because Islam is the reference point to guiding us on those issues. Right? Not the political orientation. Right? Not the political orientation. And so we end on that note. Oh, Muslims, I don't have any problem with people critiquing ideas. I have a problem when people send me things and they start making it personal. I don't like that type of discussion. There's only a certain amount of personal attack that's allowable before it has to be stopped. You understand what I'm saying? It can go once, may go twice. But if that's the methodology of constant personal attack, there's no dialogue there. So then you force me to delete you. Because that's not the environment that I create in my space. I'm here devoting my space, my time. You understand what I'm saying? My efforts to benefit. And so it's like I'm not going to allow that in my space. I don't have a problem with people critiquing. You know what I'm saying? But for the goal of making things better, not for the goal of just attacking for the sake of attacking. I don't have all of the answers. It's impossible for me to have all of the answers. But what I could do is create a platform where we can discuss and we can try to get answers. But that means that we have to change the way that we dialogue. And that means that we have to change the way that we use social media. That means that we have to organize better in order to be able to achieve that. If you're tired of just talking, we can create platforms in which we implement stuff, but that means we're going to have to make sacrifice. And that means people are going to have to be committed. And that means they just can't be behind the keyboard just shooting ideas. That means that they're going to have to be involved in the community. That means they're going to have to move beyond individualism. And and if we want to move forward, we're going to have to make those types of changes. It doesn't have to come at my hand. It could come at your hand. It could come at somebody else's hand. But the way that we're going now, we're wearing each other out. Because all we're doing is we're back and forth engaging argumentation. And that's why it says from the Sunnah, il-khisam laysat min Sunnah. All of that back and forth is not from the Sunnah. It's not from the way of the Muslims and the way that we deal with Aqidah or the way that we deal with other issues. We're not in a philosophical debate. You know what I'm saying? What are we going to get from that? What are we going to get from debating on a constant basis? I personally know on some things I'm not qualified to lead, but we can identify someone to lead. You understand what I'm saying? In other words, we have to admit our own weaknesses and our own strengths. And there's platforms. There's platforms that can be created. There's organizations that may need to be pushed to change things. But there's multiple organizations that are operating. Get behind something, or you end up behind nothing at the end of the day. How many people know, once we have Hanif Davis with us, how many people know about the 5-2 initiative, which is the only initiative which I have seen that has brought together many of the Salafi Imams in specific, and not all, but many of the Salafi Imams trying to look for constructive solutions in different areas across different parts of the country and even extending out. How many people want to be behind that effort to organize and to come up with practical solutions on multiple issues? And it's not only that organization. You know what I'm saying? You have ICNA, you have the 3 Puerto Rican imams. You know what I'm saying? You have Iman, you have a number of different organizations. I'm not even getting into the issue of whether you agree with them or not. I'm saying you find your space and get busy and make a move. That's where we're at. You have to come into some organization or create some organization, get beyond arguing with each other and ego if we're ever going to achieve anything. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.